I've been asked to share some thoughts on what drives success in today's world. But before I continue, I want to make something clear. I don't believe I have some magical formula. What I've done is apply basic principles with extreme intensity. The principles themselves aren't complicated. The difference is in the execution. I grew up in South Africa, and I was definitely an odd kid. Very interested in books, programming, science fiction. I taught myself computer programming at 10 and sold my first software at 12, a game called Blastar, for about $500. School was tough. I was bullied quite a bit. At 17, I moved to Canada with basically nothing in my pocket. I worked some pretty rough jobs, cleaning boilers at a lumber mill, cutting logs, that kind of thing. Eventually made my way to the University of Pennsylvania, where I studied physics and business. From there came Zip2, PayPal, then Tesla, SpaceX, and the rest. But here's what's important. This wasn't some clean, linear path. There were countless moments where everything could have collapsed. In 2008, both Tesla and SpaceX were on the verge of bankruptcy simultaneously. I had to choose which company to save with my remaining money. So, what principles have guided me through this journey? I've distilled it down to 10 key ideas that I believe make all the difference. Principle 8 is the most important. Let's go through them. Principle 1, pursue deep passion, not just opportunity. First and most fundamental, pursue something you're deeply passionate about, not just what looks like a good opportunity. When I started SpaceX, people thought I was crazy. The goal wasn't to create just another aerospace company. I had this fundamental belief that making humanity multiplanetary was critical for our long-term survival. With Tesla, it was about accelerating sustainable energy. Here's why passion matters. If you're just chasing money or what seems hot right now, you'll give up when things get tough, and they always get tough. In 2008, I was literally sleeping on friends' couches at one point. The only reason I pushed through was that I couldn't bear the thought of these missions failing. The passion carried me through when rational business sense might have said to cut losses. Ask yourself, if I knew this would take 10 years of brutal work with a high chance of failure, would I still do it? If the answer is yes, that's genuine passion. Principle 2, develop first, principles thinking. The second principle is using first principles thinking instead of reasoning by analogy. Most people look at what others have done and make incremental improvements. But real innovation comes from breaking problems down to their fundamental truths and building up from there. When we started SpaceX, the conventional wisdom was that rockets cost tens of millions of dollars. Instead of accepting that, I asked, what are rockets made of? Aerospace-grade aluminum alloys, titanium, copper, carbon fiber. How much do the materials cost? Only about 2% of the typical price of a rocket. So I reasoned that the fundamental cost of building a rocket should be much closer to the cost of the raw materials. Everything else is a function of the design and manufacturing process. By focusing on the physics rather than industry conventions, we eventually built rockets for a fraction of the prevailing cost. Try this yourself. Next time you face a problem, instead of asking, how have others solved this? Ask, what are the fundamental truths here? What are we trying to achieve at the most basic level? It's harder mentally, but that's where breakthroughs happen. Principle 3, embrace calculated risk and failure. The third principle is embracing calculated risk and learning from failure. Too many people are paralyzed by fear of failure, but failure is just a data point, information you can use to improve. At SpaceX, our early rocket launches failed spectacularly. The first 3 Falcon 1 launches exploded. We were running out of money. Each failure taught us something critical. I didn't expect success on the first try or even the third. I budgeted for failure. The key is to make sure you can survive failure. Don't bet everything on a single roll of the dice unless you absolutely have to. The 4th launch of Falcon 1 succeeded, and that changed everything. Had we given up after the 3rd failure, SpaceX wouldn't exist today. Here's a question for you. What risks have you been avoiding that might be worth taking? Remember, the goal isn't to fail, but to recognize that breakthrough innovation inherently carries risk. Principle 4, work with extreme intensity. The 4th principle is to work with extreme intensity. There's no substitute for hard work. When people ask how I've managed to build several companies simultaneously, the answer is simple but not easy. I work 80 to 100 hours a week when necessary. During critical periods at Tesla, I slept on the factory floor, not because I wanted to, but because there was no time to go home if we were going to solve the production problems. Is that sustainable for most people? No, and it's not meant to be. It's about being willing to sprint when necessary. If you're competing against people who are working 40-hour weeks and you're working 80 to 100 hours, you'll accomplish in 4 months what takes them a year. But let me be clear, efficiency matters enormously. I block my calendar in 5-minute increments. I batch similar tasks. I avoid meetings unless absolutely necessary. You can work intensely without working stupidly. Principle 5, build exceptional teams. The fifth principle is building exceptional teams. No matter how talented you are individually, complex problems require great teams. My success has depended heavily on my ability to attract and retain extraordinary people. I look for evidence of exceptional ability, not credentials, not degrees from prestigious universities, but actual evidence that someone has done something remarkable. In interviews, I ask candidates to tell me about the most difficult problems they've solved and exactly how they solved them. You can quickly tell who actually did the work versus who was just adjacent to it. Once you have great people, create a culture where the best ideas win, regardless of who they come from. Bureaucracy is a cancer that slows innovation. If a process or rule is getting in the way of doing the right thing, the rule should be changed. Even if you don't run your own company, you can apply this by choosing who you collaborate with carefully and creating a pocket of excellence within whatever organization you're in. Principle 6, focus on signal over noise. The sixth principle is focusing on signal over noise. We live in a world of constant distraction. Social media, news cycles, office politics, these can consume enormous mental bandwidth with very little return. Success requires the discipline to focus on what actually matters, the core problems you're trying to solve. I'm ruthless about time allocation. Every minute spent on Twitter when I'm not using it strategically is a minute not spent solving critical engineering problems or thinking about company strategy. At Tesla, we had a rule. If you're in a meeting and not adding value, leave. It's not rude, it's respecting everyone's time, including your own. Here's a filter I use constantly. Will this matter in 5 years? If not, it's probably noise. Energy is finite. Every unit of attention you give to noise is attention not given to signal. Principle 7, develop a high learning velocity. The seventh principle is developing a high learning velocity. In rapidly changing fields, the rate at which you can learn might be your most important competitive advantage. When we started SpaceX, I wasn't a rocket scientist. When we started Tesla, I wasn't an automotive engineer. I had to learn these domains rapidly. I use what I call a knowledge tree approach. First, establish the fundamental principles, the trunk and big branches. Don't start with the leaves, the details. For instance, if you want to understand batteries, start with basic electrochemistry, not with the latest battery management algorithms. Once you have the fundamentals, the details become much easier to assimilate and contextualize. Another accelerator, ask lots of questions, even if they seem basic. Many people limit their learning by trying to appear knowledgeable rather than being genuinely curious. And practice teaching what you learn. If you can't explain it clearly to someone else, you haven't truly mastered it. Can you explain a complex concept to a smart high schooler? If not, you probably have gaps in your understanding. Principle 8, commit to extreme execution. Now, principle number 8, which I consider the most vital of all, is committing to extreme execution. Ideas are easy, implementation is hard. The difference between success and failure usually isn't the quality of the idea, it's the quality of the execution. Why is this the most important principle? Because without execution, everything else is just theory. I've seen countless brilliant ideas fail because of poor implementation, and I've seen seemingly ordinary ideas succeed wildly because of exceptional execution. At Tesla, our mission to accelerate sustainable energy isn't unique. What's unique is our relentless focus on making it happen, building factories, solving thousands of engineering problems, creating a global charging network. Let me give you a specific example. When we were scaling Model 3 production, we hit what I called production hell. We were supposed to be making thousands of cars per week, but we were barely making a few hundred. The automated line wasn't working. The conventional wisdom would have been to slow down, reassess for months. Instead, I moved into the factory, worked around the clock with the team. We rebuilt the production line while it was running, replaced automation with human workers where necessary, found creative solutions to bottlenecks. It was brutal, probably the most difficult professional challenge I've faced, but that commitment to execution got us through. Now, Tesla produces over 1 million vehicles annually. Execution is about persistence plus creativity plus speed. You have to keep pushing forward, but also be willing to pivot when something isn't working. And you need to move. Fast momentum matters enormously. How can you develop this execution mindset? Start by being honest about the gap between plans and reality. Most projects fail because people deceive themselves about progress. Create tight feedback loops, measure results frequently, and adjust course when needed. Second, develop a bias toward action. When in doubt, try something. A good decision today is better than a perfect decision next month. Third, be willing to roll up your sleeves and dive deeper into details when necessary. You can't delegate understanding of critical issues. I cannot emphasize enough how much this principle matters. You can have all 9 other principles mastered, but without extreme execution, you won't achieve extraordinary results. Principle 9, cultivate long-term thinking. The 9th principle is cultivating long-term thinking. Most people overestimate what they can do in a day and underestimate what they can achieve in a decade. When I laid out the Tesla master plan in 2006, it seemed wildly ambitious. Start with a high-end sports car, use that money to build a more affordable car, use that money to build an even more affordable car, and provide zero-emission power generation options. Many thought it was fantasy, but by thinking in decades rather than quarters, we've largely accomplished that plan and more. Even within constraints, you can carve out space for long-term investments. Allocate a percentage of your time, maybe it's just 10%, to projects that might not pay off for years but could be transformative. Also, develop mental models that extend beyond immediate gratification. Ask, what will I wish I had started 5 years from now? Then start it today, even if progress seems slow at first. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. With exponential technologies, small leads compound over time. Starting early, even if progress is initially slow, can lead to insurmountable advantages later. Principle 10, maintain unwavering conviction. The 10th principle is maintaining unwavering conviction in the face of doubt and criticism. If you're doing something truly innovative, most people will think you're wrong or crazy. You have to have enough self-belief to push through that skepticism. In the early days of SpaceX, aerospace experts publicly ridiculed the idea that a small startup could build orbital rockets. With Tesla, auto industry veterans said electric vehicles would never go mainstream. With Neuralink, many neuroscientists doubted our approach. In each case, the conventional wisdom was strongly against us. Had I listened to the majority opinion, none of these companies would exist. How do you distinguish between valuable criticism and noise you should ignore? That's the key question. You can't just ignore all feedback. That's a recipe for self-delusion. I actively seek out negative feedback about specific aspects of our products or approaches. That kind of criticism is gold. What I ignore are the categorical dismissals, people saying this entire approach can't work without engaging with the specifics. Often those criticisms come from incumbents who are incentivized to maintain the status quo. The vision should be almost immovable, but the path to that vision should be highly adaptable. We've changed our technical approach countless times at both Tesla and SpaceX, but the core missions have remained constant. To maintain conviction when it seems like everyone is against your idea, develop deep knowledge in your field so your conviction is based on understanding, not just hope. Surround yourself with people who share your values, but who aren't afraid to challenge your thinking. As Arthur Schopenhauer said, all truth passes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as self-evident. If you're working on something truly innovative, expect to experience all 3 stages. So those are my 10 principles. 1. Pursue deep passion, not just opportunity. 2. Develop first principles thinking. 3. Embrace calculated risk and failure. 4. Work with extreme intensity. 5. Build exceptional teams. 6. Focus on signal over noise. 7. Develop a high learning velocity. 8. Commit to extreme execution. The most important. 9. Cultivate long-term thinking. 10. Maintain unwavering conviction. Let me leave you with this thought. What keeps me going through the inevitable dark periods? When things seem impossible, what's my source of resilience? I come back to purpose. I genuinely believe the missions of my companies are vital for humanity's future. Making life multiplanetary, accelerating sustainable energy, creating safe AI, these aren't just business objectives. They're existentially important. When I'm at my lowest, I remind myself what's at stake. It's not about me or my ego or wealth. It's about moving humanity in a positive direction. That perspective makes even the worst days manageable. And honestly, sometimes it's just sheer stubbornness. I refuse to give up on something I believe in deeply. That determination has carried me through when more rational people might have quit. Remember that extraordinary success comes from extraordinary effort applied to the right problems. Don't follow conventional paths and expect unconventional results. Be willing to take calculated risks, to look foolish in the short term for potential breakthroughs in the long term. And perhaps most importantly, don't wait for permission or perfect conditions. The world doesn't change by asking politely. It changes when